Hello everybody and welcome back. Today I want to talk about something I rarely get a chance to talk about on here. Rare or obscure video game systems that I've never heard of. Until recently I didn't think there were any. And then I found out about something called the FM Towns and FM Towns Marty. So I've decided to talk a bit about them and then help you guys get set up with a standalone emulator if you'd like to play some of the games for yourselves. Okay. So the FM Towns was a Japanese gaming computer built by Fujitsu. It was manufactured from February of 1989 until the summer of 1997. Unfortunately, the FM Towns and the FM Towns Marty were only released in Japan. Now, sadly, the FM Towns Marty was an unpopular gaming PC, but for its time, very powerful. It had a CD ROM disk system, which was unheard of, and it toted 32,000 colors on screen. Now, back in 1989, this was quite impressive. The FM Towns featured a custom Fujitsu graphics chip, enabling video resolution modes up to 720 by 512. I mean, that was in 1989. Now, it had a slew of arcade ports, most which are absolutely amazing. There was also a slightly upgraded FM Towns Marty home console released a few years later, but to my understanding, the original hardware of the FM Towns can handle the new games as well, with maybe a small memory upgrade. So for a system that came out in 1989, creating arcade-perfect ports of games that were released around the same time in arcades, that's unheard of. I think the only other system that was able to do that was the Dreamcast in 1999, with games like Soul Calibur. You know, an amazing arcade game, and then you have it in the home, and it's just as good. And this is what the FM Towns Marty did with probably 30 or 40 different arcade ports. Now, some games like Raiden and Splatterhouse, people swear that the FM Towns Marty versions are even better than the arcade versions. Maybe it boils down to the sound chip. I'm not quite sure. I just keep on trying to wrap my brain around the year 1989 as I play some of these games. And I can only think that if this system were to have been released in America in 1989, the world of gaming as we know it today could be quite different, with Fujitsu, of all companies, leading the way. Now, as for the sound, I did not expect that to be so wonderful either. The sound chip is a Ricoh RF5C68. It's an 8-channel sound chip developed by Ricoh. Now, outside of just being used in Fujitsu's FM Towns computer series, the sound chip was also used in Sega's System 16 and System 32 arcade boards, which probably explains why the audio is so outstanding. I would say that it even rivals the coveted Super Nintendo sound chip developed by Sony that was released years later, in my opinion. When I load up Marble Madness in a little bit, hopefully you guys can hear it as beautifully as I did when I was playing the game. The reason why I mentioned Marble Madness is because it was the first arcade game to ever use true stereo sound, which was kind of a big deal back in the 80s. Okay, so let's get down to the emulator. You don't need to shell out $1,000 to play this system. I mean, that's what you're going to pay if you go on eBay. These things are pretty rare, especially in the States, and they hold their value. You can, however, play the games through console emulation. And the emulator that I tested out was surprisingly smooth for being one of these more obscure systems. Probably because it was originally PC-based, I assume. The emulator is called, and I'm probably going to botch this, tsugaru. And that is the emulator that I am using in this guide. It is an emulator for both the FM Towns computer as well as the FM Towns Marty. Now, tsugaru is an emulator made by Soji Yamakawa, aka Captain YS. And I believe it was him and him alone. So please thank him for all of this hard work. So once we're on the GitHub page for the emulator, go to Releases, and then go to the most recent release. For me, it was auto release version 2023-01-13. Go to Assets and download the appropriate emulator. It looks like they have Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. For me, it was Windows, of course. After you've downloaded the zip file, extract it someplace on your computer, for the tutorial purposes, I'll put it right in my desktop here. After opening up the folder of the extracted contents, you will see two different versions. You'll see a GUI version and a CUI version. The GUI, or the GUI, is the one you're going to want to open up. The CUI is a character user interface. It's, command line stuff. So it's probably not anything you're going to be interested in. The one thing you will need to get this emulator going is a BIOS file. That's basically the file that controls the video game's operating system, and without it, you won't be able to run any of your games. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell you where to obtain those files, but I can give you the file names. They are fmt_sys.rom, fnt.rom, dos.rom, and dic.rom. I assure you that if you Google these terms while adding in FN Towns Marty BIOS, within the first page of Google, you'll find all of these items. Okay, after you've downloaded those 4 files, save them in your FM Towns directory and load the emulator. Go to your ROM directory option and point it to the files we just downloaded. That's it. You are now ready to run the emulator. There's nothing else to it. Okay, so go to CD Image and find one of your game files. In this case, I'm loading up Splatterhouse. This is a Q file. Also, before hitting start, make sure to go down to your gamepad game port selection and configure a controller. In my case right now, I'm selecting the keyboard as default, but you can add a 360 controller or a Xbox One controller quite easily. Okay, let's load up Splatterhouse. Now, the reason why I'm picking Splatterhouse is because it's one of those arcade perfect ports. Better than perfect if you ask some people, because they claim the audio is enhanced as well with additional sound effects. So I'll sample 3 or 4 games here just to show you what the system is like. But I'm not going to do any more talking. But keep in mind, when I get to Street Fighter, I did have to change the... I had to overclock the game in order to pick up the speed. And you'll see that I do that halfway through the video. It started off pretty choppy and slow. And once I overclocked the system a little bit, the speed evened out and was pretty smooth. So tell me what you guys think. Are you interested in the system? Is it something you want to play physically or perhaps virtually through emulation? Thank you very much for watching the video, and have a good night.